Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be giving everyone just another minute or so to get logged on and get settled. And in the meantime, we'd love for you to share in the chat a little bit about your experiences with working at a grocery store. So this webinar is all about the people at the store. So share in the chat if you've had experiences working at a store, either as an adult or a middle school or high school student. And then for those that are currently working at a store, maybe share what position you started out as or what store you started out at. So we'd love to hear who in the audience has worked at a grocery store before and what positions you've participated in. And we'll get started in just another minute or so everyone can get joined on the call. I'm starting to see a few responses in the chat. So share if you have worked at a grocery store before, in high school maybe, if you're currently working at the store, what position did you start out in? This webinar is all about the people at the store. So we'd love to hear your experiences there. Stocking shelves, checking, bagging groceries. Looks like we've got quite a few different experiences coming in. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Feel free to keep sharing your experiences in the chat. But I'd like to welcome you all to the 7th webinar of the series, Keeping Groceries Alive, Successful Ownership Transitions for Rural Grocery Stores. My name is Ryle Carver, and I'm a program manager with the Rural Grocery Initiative at Kansas State University. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know that we've covered quite a few topics over the last few weeks. We've talked about different ownership models. We have talked about preparing for a business transition, assessing markets and community needs, business planning, funding a business transition. And we know, as you all probably do too, that there's a lot that goes into a successful business transition. And we think this is such a critical topic because planning for a business transition helps ensure that grocery stores continue serving their communities. And the stores the transition plans not only support food access, continued food access, but also support the financial security of grocers. So our hope is that this webinar puts this topic front of mind for grocers and community members, and we hope that you have found and will continue to find plenty of helpful information to make your grocery store's transition a success. During last week's webinar, we heard from a panel of funding partners and learned about different funding opportunities at the federal, state, and local levels. We also heard a success story of a recently completed grocery project in central Kansas, and that they used more than 10 types of funding to make their grocery store a reality. If you missed that webinar or want to rewatch any of the other webinars, you can find the recordings, the slides, and supplemental materials on our website, ruralgrocery.org, under the events tab. So today, we're going to talk about the role of store managers. And this is such an important component of a grocery store. It can be a challenge to find the right fit for your store and community. We'll start this week by going over some best practices for recruiting a store manager, and then we'll hear firsthand how 2 grocery store owners found and developed leaders to support their grocery business. We're very excited to be joined by Carly Whorton, owner of Cecil K's hometown market in Holton, Kansas, and Tasha Malay, co-owner of Malay's Market in WaKeeney, Kansas. Before we begin, we have just a couple of announcements. We mentioned last week that we are excited to launch the Grocery Business Transition Mentorship Program. This program is open to rural Kansas grocers and will provide customized technical assistance on a range of topics related to business transitions. This could be anything from assistance with creating a business transition plan to guidance on establishing a community-owned store, to mentorship for a new grocer that is taking over a recently transitioned store. Grocers who are accepted into the program will be matched with mentors to identify needs, clarify goals, and work through challenges identified by the grocer over an 8-week period later this spring. We feel this is such an important topic that we are also offering a stipend to grocers who participate in this program to ensure they prioritize this work. If you are a Kansas grocer or you know a Kansas grocer who might be interested, we encourage you to check out this program. It's available for up to 10 rural grocers, and there's a short application form on our website. The link is in this slide, which will be part of the materials posted on our website later today. If you have any questions, please let us know during the webinar in the Q&A box, and we should have some time at the end to share more information with you. One more quick announcement, and that is that the Rural Grocery Initiative is conducting a study surveying all rural and independent grocers in the state. It's completely anonymous, and the purpose of this survey is to gather key information on the characteristics and best practices of rural and independent grocery stores. It also helps RGI develop programming like this webinar series so that we can better serve you all. So Kansas grocers should have received the survey in the mail in the past month or so. For the grocers that are watching, for the Kansas grocers who are watching today, we'd love to hear from you. If you've already returned the survey, thank you. And if not, we encourage you to fill out the survey and send it back. If you need another survey, another copy, we're happy to send you another one. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our partners who helped develop and guide this webinar series. They have a wealth of knowledge and experience that can help you with a grocery business transition. We also want to thank our sponsor, the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, for making this project possible. Lastly, I have just a few housekeeping items. So the webinar is being recorded. You can find this recording at ruralgrocery.org under the events tab. The closed captioning feature will be turned on, and attendees can control their individual caption settings by clicking the live transcript button on your Zoom panel. If you have any technical questions, our students, Lauren and Jess, are on standby to help out. And we will have time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A box rather than the chat box. That helps us keep track of the questions as they're coming in and make sure we don't miss anything. You also can like the questions that have already been asked if there's one that you want to make sure is addressed. And so you're welcome to use the chat box to continue to share ideas and comments, but for specific questions, please use the Q&A box. Okay, I think we can get started now. So we will begin with Erica Blair from the Rural Grocery Initiative, giving a brief overview of things to consider when recruiting a new store manager. Erica, I will turn it over to you.
All right, yes, thank you, Ryle. Hello, everyone. I am really excited for this webinar today because we have two really incredible grocers with us. And we'll get to learn directly from them how they found and developed the managers of their stores. But before getting into that conversation, I thought it would be helpful just to sort of set the stage and talk a little bit about why this is such an important topic, especially in the context of grocery business transition planning. So we'll talk about that, and then I'll share a few of the best practices that we've learned over the years when it comes to recruiting store managers. So next slide. So to start out, why is this so important? Why did we decide to dedicate a whole webinar to this topic? Well, it probably comes as no surprise to anyone watching this webinar that the grocery store manager plays a crucial role in the store's success. And just to clarify, in some cases, the manager and owner are the same people. But in other cases, like with a regional chain or some of the shared ownership models that we've talked about throughout the series, they are two different people. So either way, these roles are very important, and today's focus is on managers. So the managers are making some of the most important decisions for the store, probably hundreds of decisions in a day. And they're responsible for things like inventory. So they're making decisions about what to order and how to price those goods. They're in charge of marketing the store. So that means they're figuring out how to get more people through the door, what promotions and sales are they going to offer, where are they going to run ads, how are they going to maintain a consistent brand. They're planning the store's layout and making sure merchandise is displayed in such a way that they're maximizing sales. They're also managing employees. So they're assigning work, resolving conflicts that might arise, making hiring and firing decisions. They're overseeing the store's budget. So they're keeping track of every penny that enters the store and every penny that leaves the store, and making adjustments to increase profits and minimize losses. So that is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that goes into the job description of a store manager. But what also matters is the store manager's attitude, because they can set the tone for the entire store. So we recently spoke to someone who told us that when she was a grocery store manager, she noticed that her mood had a ripple effect throughout the entire store. So if she was on edge, by the end of the day, everyone at the store was on edge. So the store manager really influences the entire work environment. Store managers also interact a lot with the community, and people begin to associate the store with the manager. So building positive relationships with customers is really important. So overall, this slide is really just illustrating the point that finding the right store manager is key for the long-term success of a grocery store. And we've heard several examples during this webinar series where a new store manager was needed once the grocery business changed ownership. So if you're planning a business transition, this might be something that you need to think about sooner rather than later. Next slide. So this question gets brought up a lot. How do I find a store manager? And this can be a real challenge, especially in rural communities where you might have a smaller pool of applicants. So what we've heard is that a best practice is to look internally first. So you want to identify talent who are already working at the store, people who show promise and interest in taking on a leadership role. So the benefit of this is that you already know their personality, their values, their work ethic. They also already know the store's culture and have ties to the community. So if you're starting to plan a business transition and you still have a few years to go, this is a good time to be proactive and start thinking about who is in your bench of store leaders. Who do you want to carry on the culture and the legacy of your store? It can take some time to get someone fully trained and up to speed with all of the different responsibilities that a store manager has. So it's good to begin grooming them early. And generally speaking, it's just good practice to give employees a path for career advancement, which helps retain your talent and keeps them feeling motivated by these different opportunities. But if finding a good candidate within the store isn't an option, there are also some good ways to promote the position externally. So for instance, we learned in the very first webinar of this series that when Stubbs Market transitioned to Erie Market, they found their store manager by advertising through a newspaper ad that they circulated throughout the state. Oftentimes we hear that a community member will see the ad and then share it with a family member who's wanting to get back to the area. So that's one method that can work. You can also take advantage of your networks. So you can share the position with local business owners and local community leaders because they might have people in mind. You can let your distributor know. Distributors are connected with many other grocery stores, and they might know someone who's looking for a bigger leadership position. And of course, the same can be true if you are a member of any co-op networks or grocery associations. So the takeaway here is to share the open position widely and use the connections you already have to spread the word. Next slide. Okay, but once you get some potential candidates for the position, how do you find the right fit? So you want to make sure that the manager is a good match for the culture of the store and the community. So as an example, if you're in a rural community, it helps to find a store manager who has experience working in rural communities. So you can also ask yourself, what is the culture of the store? Or another way to put it is, what do we value? What are our goals? What's our vision? What makes us different? What are the expectations of people who work here? All of these different things that make up the culture of the store help drive decisions at the store. So it's really important to make sure that the store manager aligns with your values. So finding the right fit is, clearly really important. But then once you hire someone, how do you go about developing their skills so they can do the job? So as we'll see in just a few minutes, it's not essential that they know how to do everything in the job description right away, because these skills can be taught and it can take time, but that's totally normal. So some options that we have listed here for developing the skill set of store managers include shadowing. This is probably the most obvious and most common way of providing hands-on training. So letting a new hire work alongside an experienced employee. And going back to the example that I mentioned earlier of Erie Market, what really helped the new store manager was being able to work with the previous store owner for several months before that store completely transitioned ownership. So that's also certainly something to consider when planning a business transition as well. And then if you're at a co-op and you have time to develop someone into a store leader, there are also some apprenticeship programs that provide training. Oftentimes also grocery distributors will have educational training. So it's good to check in with them on that as well. Next slide. So I also just wanted to point out quickly that if you're looking for additional resources, a lot is available online. So you could start by looking at the various grocery associations, because they often will produce reports and host webinars and offer other kinds of classes and create training materials. They develop all kinds of resources on just about anything you could think of when it comes to food retail, including the topic that we're discussing today. So some of the materials they produce are free to the public. Sometimes you can only access them if you're a member. Sometimes you have to pay for them. But you could start looking for additional tools from the groups that you see here on this slide. There are also publications that focus specifically on the grocery industry. So, reading those kinds of news articles can also provide some useful insights. So a couple examples that we have on this slide are Grocery Dive and Progressive Grocer. And now finally, the last resource that I wanted to mention is the Rural Grocery Network. So this is a Facebook group that helps independent small town grocers across the country connect with each other and learn from each other. So if you are a small town grocery store owner or a manager, we really encourage you to join. You can use this group to ask questions, share ideas, share any innovative solutions that you've come up with, or just talk about what's going on in the grocery world. So this group is limited to grocery store owners and managers just because we want to make sure that open and productive conversations are happening. Next slide. Okay, so now, without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce the two grocers that we have with us today, Tasha Malay and Carly Whorton. So what we are going to do is give each of them a chance to tell us a little about their story. So how they got to where they are today as store managers and what it was like developing store leaders. And then we'll bring them both together for kind of an informal discussion so that we can dig even deeper into this topic. And then after that, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So as we hear from Tasha and Carly, we encourage you to use the Q&A box and ask any questions you may have. This is just a really great opportunity to pick their brains and learn directly from grocers because they're really the experts here. Next slide. So we're going to start out by hearing from Tasha Malay, who is a co-owner of Malay's Market in WaKeeney. Tasha actually went through the process of a grocery ownership transition, and she is an example of someone who was recruited internally to become the next grocery store owner. So Tasha, we're really, really glad that you're able to join us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, hello. Like she said, I'm Tasha. Me and my mother co-own Malay's Market here in WaKeeney. If you want to go to that next slide. This is basically the timeline, or well, I guess I'll tell you about WaKeeney. We have about 1,900 people in town and about 2,800 in the county. So we're a pretty small town. We do have a Dollar General here in town, but as far as like a Walmart or a Dillon's, the closest ones are about 30 miles away. And then we do have some other independent groceries about 20 miles away, north, south, east, and west from us. Our store, this building has held a store since the 80s. It was a Bogart's, it was a Dietz's, it has been a Surefine, an IGA, a food center. It's been, I say, just about all of those. It's the owners that we bought it from opened it in 2000, and we moved here into WaKeeney, my family did, in 2002, and that's when Cindy, my mother, started as the bookkeeper here. She discovered that the manager that was working here was stealing money, and so then obviously reported it to the owners. They fired him, and they opened it up for, applications to hire a store manager. And because she was, in the office and seeing all the applications come in and seeing the people coming in to pick up the applications, she got a really good insight of who would be applying to be her boss. And she kind of decided that she didn't want to work for any of those people. And so she threw her name in the hat and became the manager in 2004. And she would even tell you that when she became the manager, as far as training went, there wasn't a whole lot. She had 2 years in the store, so she knew the people, she knew the day-to-day functions of the store, and so she didn't really have a whole lot of like direct training. And a lot of it was, when you come up to a problem, you call the owner, he walks you through it, you know how to deal with it next time. And that's kind of been a whole lot of the same method that we've used with training our store manager now. I started here in 2005. I was 14 and I was a carryout and worked here off and on for the next 5 years until I did become full-time in 2010. In 2006, the store became the only grocery store in town. So up until that point, there were 2 grocery stores. And as gas prices got lower and people started commuting to work more and bigger things opened up, in Hayes, more and more people started shopping there. And then, the store or the town just couldn't support both stores. And so that was in 2006, this became the only store here in WaKeeney. And then, like I said, in 2010, I became full-time. I came on as an evening manager, moved up into the bookkeeper position, and then worked through the bookkeeping into the social media director for a while. Did that for this store and then 5 others that our owners had. And then in 2018, we had kind of joked around with the owners and said, we're kind of interested in buying the store whenever you want to retire, not having any idea that they were thinking about it, just that keep us in mind. We like what we're doing. We want to see the store thrive. We want to be here for the community. We want to be involved. So if you ever decide, you don't want it, or you're done, you're retiring, keep us in mind. We definitely want to be the ones you guys come to. And so then in 2018, they surprised us and said, we want to sell you the store. And so it did take about a year for us to go through that transition of getting appraisals and getting financing and doing all of the evaluations and, planning. And we, at the time, we honestly, we didn't have any of our, we didn't have an LLC or a business or a partnership, anything established for that. We didn't have a bank account for it. We didn't have a name. And so, it kind of blindsided us, and we got our ducks in a row real quick. And it did, like I said, take about a year, but we, got the store bought. So then, if you want to go to the next slide. This is the outside of our store, and then we got new signs on it. That took about a year with the planning and costs and everything else, but they're up. And then that's our front registers. We have 3 of them. And one thing about being the owner that I like so much is that when we have ideas, we just do them. We don't have to ask somebody and, then wait for them to email the rest of everybody to see, what the opinion is or if it's okay. And so, we have these ideas and we're just like, oh, let's do it. And so when we got new aisle markers that, when they used to say Heartland Foods, so we had to get new ones, we went ahead and had these printed also. And because they matched the old Heartland Foods ones, they had the Heartland Food logo on them. And we kind of talked about it. And I looked at Cindy and I said, well, can we just name them, what we call them? And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I never refer to that as register 2. I always just say the middle one. And, or like if I'm on the manager's drawer, I just say, oh, I'll get you on this one. And so that's what we ended up deciding to name those. And that's, one of those fun things you get to do as owners is you make those decisions. And you don't have anybody tell you no. And if you want to go to the next slide, that is my mother and I, and in both pictures. The first one, we went to the Plains Dairy at the down in Amarillo, Texas. They are the dairy that supplies our warehouse, and they are actually a subsidy of the warehouse. So that's something that when you buy stock in your warehouse, you buy stock in the dairy. Little shout out to them. If you are interested in learning about AFI, they are definitely very interested in telling you about themselves. They took us down there, gave us tours of the warehouse. They have a print shop. They took us on tours of where they make all of the signs and print the ads. And then also they have a vegetable packing plant that they took us through, as well as a bakery and a dairy. And so that's, they'll give you a fancy lab coat and safety goggles, and you can tour the dairy. And then also the picture next to that is when we bought the store. That's the day we bought it. And the next slide is me and my husband, Michael, and he is the manager of the store. And then me and my family, my 2 boys. When we started throwing around the idea of buying the store, I looked at Michael and said, is there something you want to do at the store? We knew we were losing 2 important employees. We were losing basically an assistant manager and then also the scanning coordinator. And so Cindy and I had, planned that her role would be moving into doing the finances and the office work, and then mine would be jumping into scanning, coordinating, and doing the advertising. And so we knew that we were losing, basically all of Cindy's tasks as the store manager, as well as what I was doing, assisting her, and what the assistant manager was doing. And so we kind of threw it around with Michael, and he said, I think that's something I would like to do. So we went ahead and brought him in, got him a shirt, and we've been working on training him. And most of, like I said, with Cindy, her training was, coming up to an issue and working through it. And that's kind of been the way it was with Michael. We do a lot of, hey, I'm going to go do this. Why don't you come watch? Or, hey, I got to order this. I'll come show you how, and so he's been doing really well. He's very outgoing, and that's a very good quality to have for your store manager, because they are the face of the store. They're somebody people see a lot of. And so he does a very good job of, being friendly with the customers. He knows most of the customers because we are such a small town. And so that is our story of how we bought the store and moved somebody into management.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tasha. That was really fantastic.
Thanks.
So good to be able to hear your story, and so great to hear another example of a grocery ownership transition, a successful ownership transition, and it seemed like it was pretty seamless. So thank you so much for sharing that. And again, if folks in the audience have questions for Tasha, please feel free to post them in the Q&A box. And we should be able to get to those questions toward the end of the webinar. So now we're going to pivot over to Holton, Kansas, where Carly Whorton is the owner of Cecil K's Hometown Market, which has been open since February 2018. So Carly, I will let you take it away.
Wonderful. Hello, I'm Carly, and we will go on to the next slide. So I'm actually the co-owner of Cecil K's. This lovely gentleman right here is my partner. He's also my first cousin. Our moms are sisters. So that picture on the bottom left is the day we met. I think I was like a week old in that picture. So we've done a lot of life together. And when I was ready to start my first business in early 2017, I left my job at a software company. I'd been there for 5.5 years and was intent on letting that business unfold, whatever it was going to be. And a few months later, Chad called and he had a crazy idea about opening a grocery store in our hometown. So his original idea, he has several meat businesses, both like packing facilities, packing plant facilities, and processing facilities and retail. So a wide variety of things that he was already doing, and really wanted to open a fresh meat option in Holton, in our hometown. And as he was scouting retail space, the best space that he could come up with was the former Ron's IGA building. I think if you go to the next slide, it is the before. Nope. That's okay. Yeah, so this is the building that we bought. And if you back up, we'll talk through the timeline there. So Holton is a little bit bigger than WaKeeney. It has about 3,500 people in Holton, and then the Jackson County has about 12,000. So the timeline of how we came to be the owners of Cecil K's and how Cecil K's came to be, back in the day, Holton had 2 grocery stores and a Walmart with a small food section. It wasn't a Walmart supercenter yet. And then in 2014, Walmart announced that they planned to build a supercenter in Holton, not reworking the current store, but building a completely new store, and they were planning to sell the old store. So fast forward a couple years, and March of 2016, Ron's IGA decides to close proactively prior to the new Walmart opening, understanding that Holton and Jackson County is not big enough to support a Walmart supercenter and 2 grocery stores. So they closed after 45 years in business under the same family of owners, the Colemans, great people if you know them. And in July 2016, then the new Walmart Supercenter opened, and less than a year later, the second grocery store, Country Mart, basically ran out of business. So they were in business for 28 years in Holton. I think their ownership changed at least once. So by the time we came along in July 2017, there was only Walmart Supercenter in Holton, and no other grocery options without driving at least 15 to 20 miles away. And really, as we approached this, we didn't necessarily look at it as we were competing head to head with Walmart. I mean, to a certain extent, yes, we were, but we also wanted to offer something very different. Our store is only 8,500 square feet on the sales floor. So that's a much smaller footprint than Walmart, obviously. You can park like right outside the front door, walk just a few steps to get inside. So that small town convenient size was something that we thought the community would support. And we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary a couple weeks ago. So that is very exciting. We got 3 years under our belt at this point. So if we go forward, this is the before picture of the exterior. It needed some love, some TLC. The building in general it wasn't in bad shape. There were some more superficial changes that needed made more than anything. So if you flip to the next slide, this is the completed exterior of the store. So we did some new tin, we added paint, we straightened and braced the posts out front. So not a lot there, and then got a new sign that had our name on it. And then if you go to the next one, we get to see what the inside of the store looked like. So this was the first day that we took the keys. So this is July 2017. When we walked into the building, this is what it was. When the Colemans, or when Scott Coleman sold it, or shut down the store, he had an auction to sell off all the equipment, all the shelving, everything. The place was completely empty. He had also retrofitted it quite a bit to just an empty shell of a building. So things like the electrical panels, he took those down. He cinder blocked in the holes in the wall that were for the rear feed coolers. Some of the plumbing had been removed. He wanted it to be totally ready for anybody to come in and do anything they wanted with the building. He was not counting on us showing up a little over a year later and turning it back into a grocery store. So a lot of what we had to do was superficial. I mean, there's 8,500 square feet of chipped, gross looking tile on the floor. That was a huge undertaking. We also had to buy new equipment, new shelving, all of that good stuff. And if you flip to the next slide, it is the after of the interior. So what it looks like now. So my favorite part is the ceiling. I wanted a ceiling like that. It wasn't in the budget. We took the ceiling tiles down to clean them because the building had been vacant for like a year and a half. And so they were just absolutely disgusting up on top. And we wanted it to be as cleaned out as it could be. And so they took down all the ceiling tiles and I walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, the ceiling I wanted was already up there and we didn't have to pay anything for it. We just took down the drop ceiling and that was already up there. So I thought that was pretty cool. We redid the floor, did some painting. The mural that you can see along the back wall, that was already there. It was installed, I think, in the 80s. I know by a local artist and photographer, and the farms that are painted in the mural are actual Jackson County farms. So the owner at the time drove around with this photographer. They took pictures of different farms in the area and painted them into this mural. It wraps all the way around 3 sides of the store. And it's so fun. There's people still in the area whose homestead these are. And so like at least once they've come in to like take pictures in front of their family's farm in the mural. So as we were doing the remodel, that was something we heard a lot, that people did not want us painting over that mural. That was never the intent. It's definitely one of the coolest pieces of the store. So if you go to the next slide, I think that's all I have on the remodel. So, I mean, Cecil K's as a grocery store, it's a full service grocery store. We have a meat counter. We do have a bakery deli. We haven't operated our hot food deli in about a year, but we do still bake fresh every morning. And then full grocery. And so Jeff Hilliard, allow me to introduce you to the Cecil K store manager. He was one of our first employees. So he started with us 6 weeks before the store opened. And so he helped me in the final stages of the project management. Like he researched and found our open sign. He did a handful of other little projects for me. In that time before the store opened, we both sat through the POS training, which was like a whole week of training, 6 to 8 hours a day. So we did that. He has no grocery experience whatsoever in his resume. He had a consistent job history. That's one of the things I liked about him, was that he had been at each job for several years. At one of his jobs, he also had a small amount of experience as a supervisor, like a shift supervisor. So some people management experience. Otherwise, I remember doing the interview the very first time I had ever met Jeff. I didn't know who he was otherwise. And I basically said something like, do you think you can learn how to do it? And the look on his face instantly told me, like, of course I can learn anything. And I was like, okay, you're my guy. So, and he's learned everything that we've ever thrown at him. And so it took about 2.5 years to get to the point where he was flying solo as the store manager. and it looks like the slide cut off, but that's okay. So he was hired as the grocery manager. So back when he started before the store opened, he came on board as the grocery manager. He was in charge of ordering grocery. He also handled DSD. So at the time, I mean, that was a huge undertaking for someone who doesn't know anything about grocery. As we went, it was about a year later, we promoted him to assistant store manager. So on, in title and with the rest of the employees, if Carly's not around, Jeff's your guy. Go to Jeff. He can do everything Carly can do. It was another few months later that we promoted him to store manager in training. Again, this was a lot for the benefit of the employees, the other employees, who just so that they could get up to speed with seeing him in that light, and also for the community. I personally was the store manager for the 2.5 years before or after the store opened, before he became store manager. And I had built those relationships with the community. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce board. I'm very active in the community in different ways. And so I didn't want them to think that I was abandoning ship, that, there was continuity there and there was a plan in place, and the plan is coming to fruition just like we wanted to. So we communicated both with our employees and with the community that Jeff is coming into this role of being the store manager. And then the final transition began, I'm going to say it was September this past fall. And it took about 3 months for us to go through the actual transition, because Jeff at that point is doing a lot of the assistant manager job, and we're asking him to take my responsibilities as store manager. So we also promoted internally another girl named Haiti to act as that assistant manager person. So as we went through those 3 months, we were very mindful of, okay, like first, let's take something off of Jeff's plate and put it on Haiti's plate. So that first week, Jeff trained Haiti on some stuff and got her going. So that next week, Jeff's plate's a little empty. So that week was me giving him something, and he learned a new task. And then the next week was Jeff giving Haiti another thing. So Haiti's, every other week she's getting something new. Every other week, Jeff's getting something new. And 3 months later, my plate is empty. Haiti's plate's full of her assistant manager stuff, and Jeff's rocking it as the store manager. So we've been done doing that for about 3 months now. He's been flying solo, and all is well. I will say, just from a timing perspective, we knew when we started, like back when Chad very first pitched the idea of, do you want to come and be my partner and help me open this store, help me run it once it's open? I jumped at the idea. I was very excited. It was exactly what I was looking for at the time. And I was very clear with him as well from day one that I am not a store manager. I am a kind of person who wants to open a business, who wants to build something new. And then when that new thing is built, okay, let's find somebody to run it and I'll go build something else. So that was always the plan. So when we hired Jeff, I had in the back of my mind that I think I could train this guy to run this store. And I think I can trust him, kind of like Erica was talking about, to be the face, to be the representative of Cecil K's within our community. That I feel like he's reliable enough, he's consistent enough, he has the right values, he has the right temperament, to be our face inside of the store, even when Chad and I can't be there. And as we move on and we start other ventures. So we've all been very happy working together. I think having a few years for this all to unfold was key in that process. It definitely took Jeff some time to get up to speed confidence-wise with, going from having no grocery experience to feeling comfortable with neither Chad or me there, for him to feel confident that he can actually run the store and handle whatever comes up. But a lot of days it's still, like what Tasha was saying about, as he runs into an issue, if he's never faced that before, my phone is ringing, and we figure it out together, and he moves on and he knows how to do it next time. So he's a very quick study. And I think if somebody is capable of learning and attitude wise they're a great fit, I mean, grocery is something that can be taught, especially if you have 2.5 years to spend on teaching them and getting comfortable in that relationship. So I think that's what I got for my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carly. That is such an inspiring story. And I found myself smiling the whole time that you were talking, and also the whole time Tasha was talking as well. I know that there are a lot of people joining this webinar series who have plans to open their own grocery stores. So I know that that was a ton of really valuable information. So now we're going to have a little discussion with both Carly and Tasha, so that we can learn a little bit more about this topic of developing store managers. So I think, Tasha, if you want to turn your video back on at this time. So to start out, again, I have some questions of my own. And then in a few minutes, we'll be able to open it up for any questions from the audience. So to start us off, and you both kind of touched on this while you were sharing your stories, but I was wondering if each of you could talk a little bit more about what were the different steps, what were the different stages that you went through to develop Jeff and Michael into these leadership positions, these store managers. So for instance, what were some of the training methods that you found to be particularly helpful? So Tasha, did you want to start us off with that question?
Sure. So it helps, having the right person, like Carly said, what can you learn? And having somebody that just kind of gets it, a lot of what they're doing is dealing with people and, putting out small fires throughout the day. And, so having somebody with the level head and having somebody that can, just come in, like diffuse a situation or, read it quickly and decide what's the best course of action here definitely makes a difference. And then also, as far as training has been a lot of what I said as far as shadowing, it's been, this is what we do every day. These are the tasks that have to get done. We order on these days and this is what has to be done. And so this is, what we teach you as we do it. And so, a lot of it was one, just having a kind of, a task list of things that have to get done, but then also coming across the issues as they come up and dealing with them then. And, trying to give them a little bit of knowledge as far as like what to expect. You tell them, little anecdotes and things of, customers coming in and having their issues that they have, and then they come in and it's like, oh yeah, I can, I know how to deal with that now. And so a lot of it's just, you hate to throw them to the wolves, but it's really how you learn the best. You never learn how to swim if you don't get in the water. So
That's great. What about you, Carly?
I agree a lot with what she said. The other thing I was thinking was with Jeff, he is such a deep learner. Like, he wants to know the ins and outs, the backwards and the forwards. And so even just understanding his learning style was something I had to do early on, because I'm more, let's skim the surface and learn it all. And then when we have time, we'll come back and we'll dive. And he's like, no, piece one, deep dive, learn it all, come back. Okay, I'm ready for the next one. So he and I we had to figure each other out in our pace. And so I think it was a lot of shadowing. It was a lot of like working at his pace so that he did feel comfortable. And a lot of it, like I said, was, teaching him the grocery skills. And a lot of that is trial by fire. But then the behind the scenes, like there was almost like coaching that went into helping him believe that it was possible that he could do all of this. So investing in him as a person as well, and just, getting to know his family situation and his work experience before, and, what were his goals and what did he see in his future and how does Cecil K fit into that? And at this point, I mean, I'm going to say he's a lifer. He's very happy at the store, and that's, exactly what we like to hear. So I think keeping it incremental was the biggest tip for success for where Jeff was concerned. It was important to give him time to absorb each piece. So,
Well, and some of the things that you just talked about kind of segue into the next question that I was going to ask. So maybe Carly, you could start off with this question: is how did communication play a role in creating a successful transition?
So Chad and I specifically, Jeff is very consistent. He's very reliable. Make a plan, do it. It's good to go. Chad and I, we fly by the seat of our pants typically. And so we ran the risk of like having good intentions at the beginning and then falling off in terms of communication and not offering Jeff the support that he needed. So for us, we set a time, like a weekly time, where no matter what's going on, like we have to be there. And so we carved out like an hour and a half once a week for the three of us to sit down and all of us talk. And at that point, Chad and I can kind of coach a little bit from an owner's perspective and get him thinking how he needs to be thinking for when we're not there. And then Jeff can also bring forward, here's what's going on for me. Here was like a roadblock that I hit this week, or this situation that I didn't know how to do. So even after the 3 months of we're actually transitioning, we're teaching and changing things, we still did that for a couple months afterwards of like making sure that we meet once a week. We still do. It's maybe like 30 minutes a week now because it's just like smooth sailing, but we make sure that we schedule that, because otherwise, like, life happens and you get pulled in a million directions. And Jeff, bless his heart, is not always like good at being like, hey, stop and answer my question. He's like, oh, I'll just wait till I see him and I'll figure it out. But then he stresses. And so, yeah, we thought it was really important to like be proactive about letting him know that we're there and we'll see you. And so like making sure that we delivered on that was super important for us.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm sure that this process really wasn't always a breeze. So I'm wondering, what was the most challenging part about Michael and Jeff transitioning into these new leadership roles? And I was wondering if Tasha, maybe you wanted to kick us off with that question.
One of the big lessons that I've learned throughout this is that, expressing that the new manager is responsible for the tasks that we used to be in charge of, that Cindy and I used to do. And it took years for people to call the store and accept that when I answered the phone, I could help them. They didn't have to talk to Cindy. I know she'd been the manager for years, but I also knew what I was doing. And it took years for people to finally like, oh, I just need to place a special order. Oh, I just need, whatever. I wanted to know about a donation or, anything like that. And people finally, started getting to me. Well, then now we have to get them to trust Michael, and that, he is capable of doing these things for you too, that, I don't always have to special order your tomato juice, that Michael is actually the one that orders now. And, and it's not, I always feel bad when they come to me like they've been bothering me. I don't want to explain it like they're bothering me, but on the other side of that, we have to make the customers aware that somebody else is in charge of this now. And, I think that that's been a challenge because, like I said, I don't want people to think that I'm bothered. I want to be able to help them. I want them to know that they can come to me, if they have a problem or anything like that. But, if it's a scheduling issue, it goes, also with the employees. If it's a scheduling issue, I don't make the schedule. I don't have any idea who's coming in at 4 tonight. I don't have any idea who's called in sick, and so when somebody comes up to me and wants to know about, if they can have off next week, or so-and-so needs help doing something, I'm like, you got to talk to Michael, because I can't help you, and so that's been something that has proven difficult with, the transition, is that people don't quite accept that, Cindy or I aren't doing that anymore, and that we do trust Michael to do it, and that he is capable of doing it just because he's new, but it also goes along with, he came in and had worked one day when we opened the store, whereas I've got checkers up there that have worked here for 10 years, so some of them do know more than he does. And so it was hard for them to also accept that, like, he's learning, he's getting there, and we all just have to kind of bear with each other as we're doing this. It's we're all doing it together, so it's making that transition known and making people aware of the transition, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And Carly, what about you? What was challenging? And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. We've gotten a few questions.
I don't want to take up a ton of time, because what she said, like, I still get messages that's like, hey, Carly, can you blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Jeff's your man. Here he is. Like, here's his email, here's his phone number. So yeah, like getting everybody up to speed with like I mean, him being in the store for that long, they got used to talking to me, and so they still call me. So it's just a process of like continuing to get them over to Jeff. It lingers. That part of it lingers. Like, he can learn the job and be doing the job, but the community knowing that he's their guy, like, that part is gonna take a little bit of time. So that's okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for sharing these insights. I feel like I could talk to both of you for hours and hours on this topic. And I've learned so much in just a short amount of time. But we wanted to now open it up to questions from the audience. So Ryle has been monitoring the Q&A box. So I'm going to turn it over to her so that she can ask you some of the questions that have come in.
Great, thank you, Erica. So one kind of really basic question is just how many employees do you all have? So Tasha, if you want to share quickly, and then we'll go to Carly, just talk about the number of employees at your store.
We have 10 full-time employees, and that includes Cindy and myself as employees. And then we've got about 20 part-time. Our turnover is a lot. We have usually at least 2 people a month that leave and come between, high schoolers or somebody passing through town that needs a quick job. And we've learned it's either feast or famine with hours. That's, you've either got, tons of people that were willing to work, nobody's requesting off, and everybody only has 10 hours this week, or everybody's working 25 hours because there's nobody else available, and if anybody calls in sick, we're just working short. So we've got about 20 people ranging, and that's our part-timers range in age from 14 to in their 60s. We've got a pretty good range of people that work here, and the high school kids definitely come and go, and then a few people that have been pretty loyal to us as part-timers. But yep, that's about 30 employees is what we normally have on average each month.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm gonna say we're more like 5 full-time and like between 15 and 18 part-time. Yeah, and the part-time is almost all high school kids. I technically count as a part-time employee since I work Saturday, Sunday, and I manage the store on the weekends so that Jeff can have 2 days off every week, which after doing it myself and doing the 6 to 7 days a week thing, like, that's just not sustainable. So keeping him with 2 days off a week is very important to me because I want him to stay for a really long time. So yeah, I think 15 to 18 part-time and about 5 on the full-time.
Okay. So there's a question here about a recommended budget for hiring a store manager. And I wonder if you could just talk about like what pay level you might bring someone in at for a store manager, or how you might kind of encourage them through, maybe if you have any additional perks that you can provide, or just talk a little bit about what it means in pay for the store manager. And Carly, if you want to start with that one.
Sure. So I think we have a range on our store manager position that, we pulled out of thin air, but it's like $36,000 to $50,000 in salary. We also offer a benefits stipend for our full-time employees. We don't provide insurance, but we do give them a chunk of cash each month to buy themselves insurance if they want, or they can use that money towards whatever. And then with Jeff, because, a path for advancement is important, and now he's sitting there at kind of the top tier of his role. When he completed the transition to store manager, we also gave him 2 shares of ownership. So he is officially part owner of the store as well. There's 1,000 shares and he got 2 of them, so it not a huge share, but he did get 2. And so as we go, I would imagine that'll be how we continue to sweeten the pot, since promoting him is not really an option anymore.
Tasha, do you have anything else you want to add on that?
Not a whole lot, other than, that's Cindy was making, we really just hired Michael at what Cindy was making. as the store manager at the time. And she had recently received a raise because they had raised the federal minimum on what a salaried employee is allowed to make. And so that was basically what we started at. And then a little bit of insight, maybe it might help you. I remember when I was talking with our owners, I had gotten, it was before they had offered to sell us the store and everything. I had gotten a job offer, and I looked at, one of them and said, this is kind of what they're offering. And he said, well, if they can offer you 40,000 or more, you should take it. And so as an assistant or as a bookkeeper, as I was the marketing director for 6 stores, that was, 40,000 was more than what I would be making at that position. And so that, if that gives you a kind of round number.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that this has been another week where the hour has gone by so fast. There are a couple more questions, and I think what we will do is pose them to Carly and Tasha after this webinar and have them send some responses, and then we'll post that with our webinar materials online. So keep an eye out for that. And we will just wrap up really quickly. If you want to go to the next slide, Jess. Next week's webinar is all about Grocery Operations 101. We will have Sean Park from the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs join us and share some of the basics. And then we will have 2 rural grocers join us to talk about how they learned the industry and got up to speed. So we hope that you all can join us again next week. We are so glad you're able to join us today, and we hope you have a great week. Thanks all.